The quarter was still in my palm when the auctioneer's gavel slammed down. 25 cents. That's what my new beginning cost. A rusted coin, tarnished around the edges, exchanged for a forgotten cabin buried deep in the Colorado mountains. The room of bidders barely noticed, too busy chasing foreclosed condos and bankrupt strip malls. But me? I couldn't breathe. My hand shook like I just held lightning. See, a year earlier I wouldn't have been here. I was a broken man sitting in a Denver apartment that smelled of reheated burritos and old pipe glue. Divorce had carved me down a bone. My wife gone, my savings gutted, my spirit chewed to scraps. The kind of nights where you stare at the ceiling and wonder if the next day is even worth dragging your boots onto the floor. But I was raised different. My father was a carpenter who believed in two things: the strength of wood grain and the strength of will. Rot's only skin deep, he used to say while sanding weathered boards. The bones tell the truth. Maybe that's why, when I saw Whispering Pines, Cabin Lot 17, minimum bid, 0.25 on the county list, I couldn't look away. I drove up the mountain the next morning, half expecting to find nothing more than rubble. But then the lake appeared, still as glass, framed by peaks dusted with the last breath of winter. And there, perched on the shoreline like a scarred old fighter, stood the cabin. Roof sagging, windows shattered, moss eating the logs. But the foundation was straight. The bones were solid. Just like Dad said, that cabin didn't look abandoned to me. It looked patient. So I placed my coin on the courthouse table, and the land was mine. The first week was all hammer and grit. I tore out rot until my hands blistered, hauled out garbage until my back screamed. Every night, I collapsed on a camping mat inside those four crooked walls, the smell of dust and pine needles settling into my skin. It was exhausting, filthy, honest work, and for the first time in years, I felt alive. That's when she arrived. I was knee-deep in lumber scraps when I heard the low growl of an engine. Not the rattle of an old pickup. This was smoother, arrogant, like money on four wheels. A black Escalade rolled up my gravel drive, sunlight bouncing off chrome polished, bright enough to blind. The door opened, and out stepped Delilah Thornfield. You ever meet someone who carries themselves like the world already belongs to them? That was her. Designer boots, planting themselves on my driveway like they were claiming territory. Hair lacquered into submission, smile carved sharp enough to cut glass. She held a binder thick as a Bible, hugged against her chest like scripture. "Good morning," she said, her voice all velvet wrapped around steel. "I'm Delilah Thornfield, president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association." I wiped sawdust from my hands and offered the tax deed. "Marcus Kane, owner." Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes did something strange. They calculated, measured, like a hawk circling a rabbit. "Sweetheart," she cooed, flipping open her binder. "Tax auctions don't override community covenants. And this structure," she gestured at the cabin like it was roadkill, "violates 17 of them." I laughed, thinking she was joking. 17 violations on a property built 40 years before her HOA even existed. "Lady, this cabin's older than your rulebook. I bought it fair and square." Her perfume drifted sharp in the mountain air as she stepped closer. "People like you usually find it easier to walk away," she murmured. "People like me. Blue-collar, divorcee, plumber. The type who isn't supposed to own a slice of paradise." She gave me 72 hours to reconsider. Then she slid back into her Escalade and vanished in a spray of gravel dust, leaving silence heavy as judgment. I stood there gripping my 25-cent receipt, the mountains towering over me like silent witnesses. My father's voice echoed in my head. "Rot's only skin deep. The bones tell the truth." I hadn't realized yet, but this wasn't just a cabin anymore. It was a battleground, and Delilah Thornfield had just declared war. The next morning, I woke to the sound of loons echoing across the lake. For a second, I forgot everything. Forgot the divorce, the debt, the woman with her polished smile who thought she could push me off land I'd bought fair and square. The sun bled gold over the mountains, spilling through the broken windows of the cabin, painting the dust motes like fireflies. That was the last moment of peace I'd get for a while. By Monday, the harassment started. I was hauling out rotten floorboards when a white pickup rolled in, hazard lights flashing like it had some divine right to be there. A kid barely out of college stepped out, reflective vest swallowing his soft frame. Clipboard in hand, he strutted toward me with all the authority of a mall cop. "Compliance officer," he announced. His name tag read Bryce Thornfield. Nepotism wore his face like a Halloween mask. "You're parked incorrectly," he said, pointing at my truck. I glanced at my truck, sitting square in my own driveway. "It's a driveway, parallel to the property line," he recited, scribbling on his pad. "Not perpendicular. That's a 500 violation." The pen squeaked as he tore off the citation with a flourish of Hemingway, signing a masterpiece. He slapped it against my chest like it was gospel and strutted back to his truck. That was just Monday. Tuesday, noise violation. My sin. Running a circular saw at 9 a.m. Wednesday, waste disposal. Apparently, a construction dumpster on a construction site was unacceptable. Thursday, landscaping. I hadn't planted flowers around a foundation I was still rebuilding. Every day, another fine. Another slap of paper meant to bleed me out one cut at a time. By the end of the week, I had a stack of citations thick enough to wallpaper the cabin. And Delilah? She was nowhere to be seen. That was her brilliance. She let her nephew play hall monitor while she stayed in the shadows, sipping wine in her gated house, waiting for me to break. At night, I sat on the porch staring at the dark ripple of the lake, listening to the distant chorus of frogs. The silence pressed in on me, heavy with doubt. I thought about my ex-wife, Jennifer, how she'd looked at me when she packed her things, like I was a man who couldn't hold his life together. She'd been right back then. I'd been drowning. But out here, with my hands blistered from labor, the scent of sawdust thick in my clothes, I didn't feel like a failure. I felt like a man rebuilding something, not just a cabin, but himself. And that's why I couldn't walk away. By the second week, I realized Delilah's strategy wasn't just about breaking me financially. It was about breaking my will. Every letter, every notice, every smug knock at the door was a test. Did I belong here, or was I just some blue-collar intruder in her mountain kingdom? I drove to the county office, hunting for answers in a building that smelled like mildew and despair. Hours of digging through yellowed files led me to a truth sweeter than whiskey on a cold night. The HOA had only existed for 8 years. My cabin had been built in the early 60s, long before their covenants even existed. Pre-existing non-conforming use. That was the phrase. My father would have grinned ear to ear. Old buildings get protected from new rules. In plain English, Delilah had no legal right to touch me. But I knew one truth better than most. In this world, being right isn't enough. By the time I stepped out of the courthouse, the autumn air had turned sharp, cutting at my lungs. The mountains loomed dark against the sky, and for the first time, I wondered if I was in over my head. Because Delilah wasn't just some nosy neighbor. She had money, connections, and a talent for bending rules until they snapped. And I was just one man with a quarter deed in his pocket. That night, I lit a fire in the cabin's old stone hearth, the smoke curling up into rafters scarred by time. I held the citation stack in my hands, the papers warm against the glow. For a moment, I thought about burning them, letting the flames eat Delilah's little empire one sheet at a time. But I didn't. I pinned them to the cabin wall, one by one, until they formed a crooked mosaic above the fireplace. A reminder, proof of the war she'd started. The wood crackled, shadows danced, and I realized something deep in my gut. If she thought she could bury me under paper and intimidation, she was dead wrong. This was only the beginning. By the third week, the cabin had become my church. Every swing of the hammer was a prayer. Every cut of the saw a confession. Sweat dripped into the soil like penance. And with each board I restored, I felt myself piecing together something the divorce had shattered. But faith doesn't go untested. It was Wednesday morning when the sound of gravel crunching pulled me out of my rhythm. I set down the drill, expecting Bryce with another citation. Instead, a county truck rolled up, official seal stamped on the door, orange workstop sticker already flapping in the inspector's hand. Harold Fleming. Gray hair, gray face, gray soul. He didn't even bother with pleasantries. Just slapped that sticker on my cabin door. Unpermitted electrical work, he muttered, as if reading from script. All construction halts immediately. 10,000 fine for every day you continue. The words hit like a sledgehammer. 10,000 per day. My chest tightened. I'd filed the permit applications weeks ago. I told him that. He scrolled through his tablet like he was skimming sports scores. No record on file. I watched him drive off, my project branded like a crime scene. My blood boiled hotter than the August sun. That was no mistake, it was sabotage. And I knew whose perfume lingered behind it. Delilah. I stormed into the county office that afternoon, and sure enough, a clerk with glasses thick as windshields found my paperwork shoved into a miscellaneous folder, like someone had deliberately buried it. The timing wasn't coincidence. It was a move, a clean, surgical strike designed to gut me. That night, I sat on the cabin's porch, the stop order glowing orange in the moonlight, and for the first time, doubt nearly drowned me. Maybe Delilah was right. Maybe people like me weren't meant to own places like this. My ex-wife's voice echoed in my head. You don't finish things, Marcus. You start them, you fight them, then you quit. But then I noticed something. The citation stack above the fireplace. Dozens of them. Proof of every dirty trick she tried to bury me with. And in that moment, a thought sparked. If she wanted to play dirty, fine. I dragged the dirt into daylight. The next morning, I propped my phone on a ladder, hit record, and started talking. Not to lawyers. Not to Delilah. To the world. Day 21. They tried to shut me down today. Called me a criminal for fixing wiring in my own cabin. But this place isn't just a project. It's proof. Proof that you can't scare off someone willing to fight. So I'm going to show you. Every nail, every cut, every battle with this HOA. I uploaded the video before I had time to second guess. By nightfall, the comments poured in. Stick it to them. Team Marcus from Ohio. This Delilah sounds like every HOA nightmare rolled into one. Strangers, people I'd never met, were rallying behind me. Local hardware stores offered discounts. A retired carpenter dropped off spare tools. Anonymous notes appeared on my windshield. Don't quit. We're rooting for you. The cabin wasn't just mine anymore. It had become a stage, and every strike of my hammer was a defiance the whole world could hear. But with support came risk. Delilah didn't just see me now, she saw me winning. And predators don't retreat when cornered. They lunge. Friday morning, I found proof. I'd been hauling lumber when a neighbor slipped me an envelope, her eyes darting like she was handing off state secrets. Inside was a note, scrawled in shaky handwriting. Check the Kellerman place. Maple Ridge Road. That night, I drove out there, headlights sweeping over cracked foundations where a house used to be. Only weeds remained, pushing through broken concrete. The Kellermans had lived here once. Families, laughter life, all gone. And just like me, they'd been buried under citations. Squeezed until they sold for pennies. I stood in the weeds, wind howling through the skeleton of what used to be a home, and felt the weight of it all. This wasn't just a battle for my cabin. This was a pattern, a scheme. She'd been doing this for years, forcing people out, flipping properties, and lining her pockets with their misery. The fight had changed. This wasn't about me versus Delilah anymore. This was about exposing the rot she'd spread through the whole community. And I knew, standing there under the dark Colorado sky, that walking away wasn't an option anymore. Because if I didn't fight, she'd do this to someone else. The hunter had just become the hunted. The videos changed everything. What started as a shaky clip of me hauling rotten beams turned into a wildfire. Time-lapse of walls rising, porch beams straightening, windows glowing under fresh glass. The internet ate it up. By the end of the second month, 100,000 strangers were cheering me on. But Delilah watched too, and she didn't cheer. She struck back. It started with flyers. Professionally printed, glossy as a car ad, plastered around town. Con man scams mountain community. My face, grainy and unflattering, sat above paragraphs accusing me of fraud, theft, even drug use. Then came the reviews. My plumbing business, my bread and butter, got bombed overnight. Marcus Kane is a crook. Stay away. He stole from me. Dozens of lies, all anonymous, all perfectly timed to tank what little income one had left. Calls from loyal clients dried up within a week. Delilah had moved from property lines to reputation. She wasn't trying to take my cabin anymore. She was trying to erase me. One night, I sat in the half-finished kitchen, the glow of my phone casting shadows across sawdust and plywood. Comment sections that once rallied behind me now swarmed with accusations. Fraud, scammer, fake veteran, criminal. For the first time since the fight began, I almost believed them. I poured whiskey into a chipped mug and stared at the wall of citations pinned above the fireplace. Proof of her pettiness. But what if the world didn't care about proof? What if they only believed the loudest voice, the one with money, lawyers, and a smile that never cracked? That's when Sarah Martinez knocked. She was younger than I expected, a reporter with sharp eyes that didn't miss details. "I've been following your videos," she said, setting down her recorder on the table. "And the lies being spread about you? They don't line up. People have been whispering about Delilah for years. I want to hear everything." For 3 hours, I spilled it all. The citations, the sabotage, the Kellerman's vanished home. She scribbled notes like a woman possessed, asking questions no lawyer ever had. When she left, the cabin felt less lonely, like someone finally believed me. But Delilah wasn't finished. 2 days later, Sheriff Rodriguez showed up in my driveway, hat in hand, eyes heavy. "Marcus, I don't want to be here." He handed me an envelope thick with legal threats. Fraud investigation. Allegations I'd falsified the tax deed, concealed restrictions, lied in court filings. "Criminal investigation starts Monday," he said quietly. "Federal time if they stick it." The papers trembled in my hands. Prison. That was the new card on her table. My knees nearly buckled. Delilah hadn't just raised the stakes. She put me on trial in the court of public opinion before a judge ever saw me. That night, I couldn't sleep. The cabin's logs seemed to press in, the weight of history bearing down on me. I thought about walking away, selling what I'd fixed, letting her win just to breathe again. But when I opened the old storage trunk in the basement, hunting for documents, proof, anything, I found something that made my breath hitch. Behind a warped panel, buried under dust and cobwebs, was a rusted metal box. Inside, the original 1962 deed, hand-drawn maps, and a faded folder stamped mineral rights assessment. Numbers leapt off the page. Lithium, copper, traces of gold. Valuations in the millions. I sat there in the dim basement light, papers spread across my lap, sweat beading on my forehead. Suddenly, every move Delilah made clicked into place. The harassment, the sabotage, the smear campaigns. She didn't just want the cabin. She wanted what lay beneath it. The lake outside lapped gently against the shore, calm as if mocking the storm inside me. My hand shook, not just from rage, but from fear. Because this wasn't just greed, it was desperation. She knew what was buried here, and she'd burn me to ash before letting me keep it. I trudged back upstairs, papers pressed tight against my chest, and stared into the fire. The decision loomed like a shadow. Fight for something worth $10 million, or let it crush me. Outside, headlights swept across the gravel. A familiar Escalade idled at the edge of my drive. Delilah's silhouette sat behind the wheel, watching, waiting. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was war. The day of the HOA meeting, the mountains felt different. Heavier. Clouds stacked over the peaks like a jury gathering in silence. I drove down to the community center with Sarah in the passenger seat, the original deed and mineral rights papers in a battered folder on my lap. My knuckles were white around it. Proof. The kind that couldn't be buried or denied. The parking lot overflowed. Neighbors, reporters, strangers clutching phones like weapons. Inside, every folding chair was taken. The air buzzed with heat and suspicion, sweat mixing with perfume and stale coffee. Delilah sat at the front like a queen on trial. Perfect hair, perfect smile, pearl necklace gleaming under the fluorescent lights. She tapped her manicured fingers on the table, unbothered, like she already knew the verdict. "Thank you all for coming," she began, voice silk over steel. "We must address the chaos caused by Mr. Kane. His so-called ownership threatens our community standards, our property values, and our very way of life. Her words rolled out rehearsed, polished, poisonous. And for a moment, I felt the room tilt her way. Murmurs, nods, the subtle pull of fear she'd cultivated for years. Then she pointed at me. This man is a fraud. He manipulated the system. He deceived the court. I stood. My chair scraped across the linoleum, the sound slicing through her speech. I walked to the front, folder in hand, heartbeat drumming in my ears. Before you believe another word, I said, voice steady though my hands trembled, you deserve to see the truth. I clicked the projector Sarah had set up. The wall lit with a timeline. Citations stacked against me. Each date stamped, each violation absurd. Parking in my own driveway. Operating tools at 9 in the morning, failing to plant flowers on bare foundation. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Slide after slide. The Kellerman's foreclosure, the vanished homes, Thornfield Construction buying distressed properties. Photos of Delilah's husband signing deeds, flipping homes for hundreds of thousands in profit. This isn't about standards, I said, louder now. This is about theft. For years, she's been targeting people like us, families, retirees, anyone she could bleed dry. And when I wouldn't fold, she escalated. Flyers, fake reviews, fraud charges, even trying to frame me as a criminal. Delilah's smile faltered, just for a second. Then I dropped the bomb. The scanned deed, projected larger than life. The mineral rights survey beside it. Numbers in the millions. She knew, I said, from the beginning. She knew what this land was worth. And she tried to steal it, just like she stole from every family who ever stood in her way. The room erupted. Shouts, curses, chairs scraping as people stood. Some filmed, others shouted for her resignation. The walls seemed to shake with the release of years of swallowed anger. Delilah slammed her fist on the table. Lies, she shrieked. Her polish cracked, rage spilling out. This man is nothing. He's a plumber with dirt under his nails. Do you want someone like him representing you? Her mask shattered. That's when the doors burst open. Agent Foster strode in, FBI badge glinting like a blade. Federal marshals followed, their presence sucking the oxygen out of the room. The crowd hushed into a single, collective heartbeat. Delilah Thornfield, Foster's voice rang out, calm but unyielding. You are under arrest for fraud, extortion, racketeering, and conspiracy. Handcuffs clicked. Delilah's eyes darted wildly, searching for allies. There were none. Bryce tried to slip toward the back, but another marshal blocked his path. The room exploded into cheers, phones held high, flashes strobing like lightning. Years of fear collapsed in an instant, replaced by raw, unfiltered relief. Neighbors hugged. Some cried. Others shouted until their voices broke. And me? I just stood there, folder still in my hand, feeling the weight slide off my shoulders like chains breaking. Delilah, the woman who had looked me in the eye and told me people like me didn't belong here, was led past me in handcuffs. For the first time, she had no smile, just hollow eyes staring at the floor. I leaned close enough for her to hear. Rot's only skin deep, I whispered. The bones tell the truth. The marshals guided her out into the flashing cameras, and the crowd roared like thunder rolling through the valley. In that moment, it wasn't just my victory. It was everyone's. The Kellermans. The neighbors too scared to fight. Every person who'd ever been bullied by power wrapped in paperwork. And as the storm outside finally broke, rain hammering the roof, I realized the battle was over. I hadn't just saved the cabin. I'd saved the truth. 6 months later, the cabin no longer looked like a survivor. It looked like a promise. The roof stood straight, shingles catching morning light like armor. Windows reflected the lake in silver streaks. The porch creaked with life again, smelling of cedar oil and fresh paint. But the real miracle wasn't the wood or stone. It was the people. Every weekend, volunteers poured in. Neighbors, tradesmen, students. They hammered, painted, planted. Families brought food. Kids splashed in the shallows. Laughter echoing off the mountains that once felt like walls. The place that had been my refuge had become something bigger, a gathering ground. The grand opening of Whispering Pines Conservation Park drew thousands. I stood on the dock, suit jacket tug at the shoulders, watching children chase each other down new boardwalk trails. Veterans fished in quiet coves. Couples strolled beneath aspens, their leaves rattling like applause in the breeze. Reporters asked me how it felt to turn 25 cents into 10 million. But they missed the point. It wasn't the money. It was the fact that a quarter, the smallest coin in your pocket, had sparked a movement. Proof that even the smallest act of defiance could ripple out until it broke chains. Sarah Martinez walked up beside me, her notepad finally replaced by a camera hanging loose at her side. She'd traded deadlines for sunsets, interviews for conversations with neighbors who now called her family. "They're waiting," she whispered, nodding toward the crowd gathered near the visitor center. I climbed the steps of the stage we'd built from old barnwood and took the mic. My throat tightened. "I bought this cabin for 25 cents, I began. At the time, it felt like a joke. A broken-down shack for a broken-down man. But what happened next wasn't just about me. It was about every person who's ever been told they don't belong. About every bully who thought money and rules gave them the right to crush someone else's dream. Faces looked back at me. Tired faces, hopeful faces, faces that had carried years of silence until now. We built this place together. Not just a cabin, not just a park, but a future. One where the land provides without being destroyed, where the community grows without being strangled by fear. One where our kids learn that standing your ground isn't about violence. It's about truth. Applause rose like a wave. Some people cried openly. Others shouted my name. But I wasn't the hero. We all were. Later that evening, when the crowd thinned and lanterns bobbed on the lake like floating stars, I sat on the dock with Sarah. The mountains stood dark and watchful, reflected perfectly in the still water. She rested her head on my shoulder. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. Not fighting, not surviving, but simply living. Delilah? She was gone. Convicted. Stripped of the power she clung to like a crown. 8 years in federal prison. Restitution to families she'd bled dry. Her name was no longer spoken with fear, but with pity. Even bullies, it turns out, can't outrun the truth forever. I thought about the Kellermans, about the others who'd lost their homes before me. Their scars lingered, but their justice had finally come. And maybe that was the lesson. You can lose almost everything, but if you hold on long enough, if you fight through the rot, the bones will show. When the last lantern winked out on the lake, I slipped the quarter, the original coin, out of my pocket. Its edges were worn smooth now, dulled from years of being carried as a reminder. I tossed it into the water. It sank with barely a ripple, swallowed by the dark. "Why'd you do that?" Sarah asked softly. "Because it's not about what it bought," I said. "It's about what it built." The loons called across the lake, their cries drifting like ghosts through the night air. And as the stars scattered above us, I felt something settle deep inside, something stronger than victory, richer than revenge. It was belonging. The cabin had started as a quarters gamble, a shack clinging to the shore. But now it stood as proof that even the smallest lives, the smallest voices, could leave echoes loud enough to shake mountains. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't winning. It's creating something so beautiful, no one can ever take it away.